Ladies and gentlemen, today we are going to be comparing the kings of flow-through, the connoisseurs of reduced back pressure, and the leaders in gas mitigation, the CAT WB and the HUXWRX. Now what we're going to be covering today is sound, back pressure, and flash. I'm also going to give you guys my opinion on both of these suppressors, and per the request of some of you guys, I am going to be comparing it against the PTR Vent 3 and the Radical Defense LS5. Obviously, as you guys can visually see, these suppressors have a pretty substantial difference in size. But I'm doing these two because I was asked, and we're only going to be comparing the Radical and the PTR in the sound category and back pressure, but we're not going to be doing a flash test with that. We will be doing everything else with these two. Okay, so as a disclaimer, before we get started, I bought the PTR and the Radical with my own money. I do have a relationship with the companies, but there was no exchange of money or anything like that. I purchased them on my own. The CAT WB and the HUXWRX were both provided to me by the boys at Bauer Precision, so huge shout out to those guys. Thank you very much for letting me borrow your suppressors for this video. Now, as always, if you are looking for a more scientific review on either of these four suppressors or any of these, please head over and check out Pew Science or Silencer Summit for either of these. I like to keep it plain and simple, and I guess in my terms, bro science here on my channel. So with all of that being said, let's go ahead and get into the sound tests. Now, just so you guys know, I have arranged them in the order of which I believe them to be the quietest, starting at the top all the way to the bottom. So the top one is going to be the quietest, in my opinion, and the bottom is going to be the least quiet. But let's go ahead and get into it. Okay, so that was the sound test. Now let's talk about it. So the Radical Defense, I believe, overall was the quietest suppressor. Obviously, it has a size and pure volume advantage over some of these other suppressors, but overall, I do think that the Radical was the quietest. Now, moving on to the PTR. The PTR, I would consider it to be just about as quiet, right about the same, but what I will give the PTR is that it has a more pleasant tone to it. The tone is a little bit deeper. It's more, whereas the Radical Defense is a quiet crack from the round, the PTR is a little bit deeper of a crack from the round. Now, going down to the CAT, the WB, I believe it's not as quiet as the PTR or the Radical Defense, but I do believe it is still very pleasant to shoot. It has a little bit deeper tone to it, and more of a blast than a crack, if you will, but still throughout all of the shooting that I have done, Obviously, you're not supposed to shoot these things without ear pros, so first and foremost, I would not recommend that. However, I will say that the WB, I do believe, for its size, is a very, very pleasant suppressor to shoot. Now, the HUX. The HUX, now obviously, these guys were the pioneers of flow-through technology, or at least to my knowledge, they were. So that is extremely commendable. That being said, I do think since then, in the strictly size comparison, right, comparing K cans to K cans, I do believe that it is not very quiet, in my opinion. When compared to the Cat Whitebread, the Cat, if you shoot it for a sustained amount of time, I would imagine that you might have some ear ringing, but for sure, like first round, second round, out of the Flow 556K, there is much more of a blast and your ears will be ringing. Another thing that I did notice that I'm not quite sure of, I have heard of it before, and this could be a material thing. The HUX is 17.4 stainless steel, 3D printed. There is a bit of a ting, and hopefully you guys were able to pick that up in the sound test. But I did not get any sort of a ting out of the Cat Whitebread. This is a 718 Inconel, again 3D printed suppressor. So that was one of the things that I noticed, along with just the general sound suppression performance of both of them. Okay, now moving on to the back pressure testing. This is a very difficult thing to test for, so what I went ahead and did is I put the camera basically on the ground, I pointed it up with the sun behind my head, and we did a 15 round burst out of each of these with an FRT. And so what I went ahead and did is I ordered them in what I believe to be first up, which is the Radical Defense. I believe that to be the most gassy suppressor. Now that being said, the Radical is still a reduced, all of these are still a reduced back pressure suppressor, but obviously some perform better than others. The Radical Defense, I have shot it a ton. I've shot thousands of rounds through this thing, and I really haven't gotten gassed out hardly at all. I suppose it depends on the weather, the wind direction, and several different parameters, but as you can see from the testing, the Radical was the most gassy. Now, it's a give and a take, right? You get sound suppression, you get back pressure, performance. It just depends on what is more important to you. Moving forward, the PTR. So the PTR, I think, did just a little bit better than the Radical Defense as far as back pressure goes, but still not nearly as good as the Cat and the HUX. The Cat and the HUX, I would probably say, are just about tied, like maybe a hair. The HUX was a little bit better than the Cat, but obviously data is data and numbers are numbers, and that stuff is out there. These are just my opinions on these suppressors. Also keep in mind, for all of the testing that I did here today, I will put all of the information in the description, but I used the same exact host, the same exact ammo, down to the company, the grain weight, everything. I used IMI 62 grain M855. And now for muzzle devices, I used what came out of the box. For the HUX, they have their proprietary muzzle device system, and for the Cat, they also have their proprietary muzzle device system. The HUX, I don't believe you can get in a hub. I could be very wrong about that, but the Cat, I know that you can get in a hub compatible version, just like what I have the PTR and the Radical in. Okay, so that about sums it up for the back pressure test. Now let's move on to the flash test. Now the Radical and the PTR I did not include in the flash test because these are larger suppressors, so I didn't believe that was necessarily a fair comparison. Now both the Cat and the HUX did have a pretty substantial amount of sparking coming out of both of them. I do think overall, in summary though, the Cat just barely edged out the HUX as far as muzzle flash goes. Like I said, both of them were a little bit sparky. Now keep in mind, we are looking under night vision, so everything you see under night vision is going to be much more than the human eye can detect. So overall, I think the Cat just barely beats the HUX, at least in my testing here. Now I do have plans for this series of reduced back pressure, flow through, whatever you want to call them. suppressors, I do have plans to compare more. So how I think I'm going to do this is I will put two suppressors head to head. I'll throw in a mix of some of the other suppressors that I own, and I will compare them. And then at the end, I will choose which one is my favorite based on what I believe to be important. I think overall, the cat white bread takes the win in comparison to the HUX. So what this means is now I will take the cat and I will move this on to the next video. The HUX will stay here. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take a similarly sized suppressor, the Radical CS5, which is the short version of this, or something like the 4 systems, or whatever else I see fit. And then at the end of it, we will use the same testing parameters. I'll shoot them, I'll give my opinion on them, and then I will choose one to move on that I like the best. So that's how I think I'm gonna do this series. I'm not quite sure. If you guys have other ideas or suggestions or anything like that, let me know down in the comments below. And as always, thank you so very much for watching this video, and catch us on the next one.